Welcome to today's Criterion Learning Series. We'll be discussing leave of absence today. My name is Steve Tompkins. I'm a Principal Solutions Architect here at Criterion. And I will be switching over to my browser here in a moment just to talk about this. I do want to mention as I'm switching over that we do have some people monitoring the chat and the Q&A feature. And so if you do have any questions on what I'm covering, please feel free to ask those in any of those venues. The Q&A is great because we can answer the question kind of in a thread, but the chat also works if you would prefer that. If there's anything that we cannot answer for any reason, then what we'll do is we'll reach out to you directly and answer those questions offline. Perhaps we'll give you a call or just send you an email. And without further ado, let me go ahead and switch over to my browser here. I do want to, of course, remind everybody that you can always reach out to us. Help at CriterionHCM.com also works. And so if that is your preferred method, you can do that there. And hang on one second, I have a little delay on my browser here. It is not showing my appropriate window. There we go. All right. So what we're going to be doing mostly is in the HR. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to HR here to see that. So of course, you need to be an administrator and have access to HR to be able to do things in the leave of absence, to assign somebody to a leave of absence. And you know what? Hang on one moment. I just realized I'm on my VPN, which tends to slow me down a little bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over to employees and we're going to add somebody to a leave of absence. One of the things you can do, you'll see here is in the status down here in the bottom, if you do have anybody on leave of absence, you're able to do that and see, who's on leave of absence. I don't have any on there, so not going to do me any good to look at it that way. So here you can see that, and I'll just pick somebody. Let's just pick on Bethany here for whatever reason, and we will see. Starting off, of course, is her demographics, but we're going to see under employment. And I'm not sure what is happening to my thing. I might need to switch to a different environment. So let me see. There we go. Looks a little bit better. There we go. I'm not sure what was happening there. All right. So here you see leave of absence under an employment. And you can, of course, can always type in the first few letters as you type in. It'll show you where the menu is, but it is under employment. So that's where that's located. So, if you're not on that screen, you just click on leave of absence and you'll see this screen. Now, I don't have leave of absence for her yet, but this would also show if somebody had previously been on a leave of absence, and you'd be able to see their previous one, the start date, and the details about that other leave of absence, or many, if they've had several, you'll be able to see them all listed here. So here we'll go ahead and do that here. Well, we're going to add them to a leave of absence. Now, you'll see here we have some certain fields that are required. The type, the reason, and the start date are the three fields that are required for a leave of absence. And of course, you may have other information, like you want to put in notes and maybe an estimated end date if you have that. And of course, some other fields, we'll talk about those in a moment. So the first one here is the type, whether it's a mandatory leave of absence or if it's a voluntary leave of absence. So your choice on that one, it doesn't really change what shows up in the system here. So let's just say it's voluntary. And then you're going to have the reason for leave. Now, you'll see here, I have quite a few different reasons. In fact, I have the same reason a few different times. That's because in my settings, that's where I have that located. Now, I like to show this little blue gear here to show you how you can get right to that code table for the leave reasons. And this will bring this up, or LOA reasons. You can see these right here. Now, if you're not exactly sure where that is in settings, I'll also show you here. I'll click on open in settings. This is available really anywhere where there's a dropdown, you control the codes. Of course, you need to have access to be able to get to the user code tables right here. But if you do have that access, you can either click this gear to get to that direct code table, or you can go over to code tables under system configuration. And then this is a user code table, just so we are clear on this. Custom would be if you create any custom code tables that you might use on, let's say, a custom form, or maybe even just in a custom field or something like that, or maybe on a form itself or a custom screen. System are going to be ones that are read-only, and they're going to be used throughout the system in a number of places, including that drop-down menu right here for the type. This is one of those system ones. You can't change that. Now, if you say, hey, I need a third type here called whatever, I don't know, then we can talk about that. What you could do is submit a ticket and see if we can add that in as a customer feature request. So that would be done. I'll show you where that would go. But back to the LOA reasons, it is a user code table. And of course, there are many user code tables, but this one is LOA reason. And you'll see these various ones here. All right. So you can see what you've got. Of course, I have all of them active, but I've got 2 medical for whatever reason. So if I want to make one inactive, then it won't show up on the menu anymore. If I want to add a new one, of course, I can add right here. All right. And of course, I want to edit an existing one for whatever reason. I want to change test to something else. Maybe I want to say illness. Type ill up here. All right, so just give you some examples of how you can edit ones. And of course, if I want to add one, I could do that. Now you'll see here, sometimes when you go into a code table, there'll be additional fields here we call attributes. There is nothing here for LOA. And that's, of course, depending on the dropdown or the user code table, I should say, you may have attributes. The LOA reasons does not. All right. Now, if I add a code here, it's not going to immediately show up over here unless I refresh the screen. So if you're in here, you've selected something, and then you go, oh, I see this misspelled, you may need to refresh the screen to get it to be corrected. One of the nice things is if you do use this gear and you change something, you add new code or something like that, it will immediately show up in that one. So I like to recommend that gear, but it's certainly not the only way to get there. All right, the notes. So this is an optional field here, at least in my configuration, it's optional, where you may want to provide additional detail. So perhaps the employee gave you some thing that's happening here. They've got some type of situation. You want to put in the additional notes here. So, I can type in that as an example. So type in whatever you like there. Of course, the start date. Now, the start date is going to be driving that status I was talking about earlier when I was looking at the employee list. If the start date is in the past, as soon as I save this, the person's going to be considered on leave because it's the start date is in the past. However, if maybe they're not going to be leaving until Monday, and then they're going to be gone for a little while, it's not going to consider them on leave until that date has come. And then, of course, once it's in the past as well. So just be aware of that. If let's say I'm putting in late, it started on Monday, that's okay. She's going to be immediately considered on leave in the situation. All right, you see the estimated end date and the actual end date. So these are 2 optional dates you can put in here. So if you want to put in that you're guessing or she's told you she's going to be back by a certain date, you could do that. Maybe they just need to be gone for a couple of weeks or something like that. So maybe they're going to be back on the 8th, something like that. You can put in that date there. Now, the actual end date might be different. Perhaps they have an illness and they didn't recover as quickly as they thought, and this is going to be the 15th or some other day. This will be, the leave of absence will then calculate based off of the entire date here with the actual end date. And this can be used for notifications, though. So the estimated end date as it approaches, you may want to notify their manager or send something to the employee to say, you're scheduled to be back on the 8th. Do we need to update that date? Because perhaps, something happened and you just need to let us know. So you may want to use that out there. All right, the attachments. So here I can add or drag and drop 1 or more files if I need to. So I can just click on add a file and browse and update that file there. Or like I said, I can drag and drop. Maybe they sent you something and you need to add that in here, whatever that particular thing is. Let's just, I don't know, I think I have like a PDF. I'll just add a licensed PDF there just so you can kind of see what that looks like. And of course I could add several. Maybe they have the initial doctor's note, and then when it gets extended for whatever reason, they send you another one. You can add those all in here if you need to. All right, here, stopping their pay and or stopping their time off accrual. So maybe they are going to be using sick leave while they're gone. So they're going to continue getting paid for the 2 weeks that they're scheduled to be gone. And that's okay. So you don't need to have them inactive in payroll. They're just going to continue to get paid, even if they're not getting paid their full, salary or hours, they still may get paid. So you may want to leave that blank to start. But if they're going to be gone for several weeks or maybe even months, and they don't have enough time off to cover it all, you might need to stop it sometime after the start date of that leave. So if she was going to be gone for 3 months and only had 2 months worth of sick time, you might want to put in here that you're going to stop the pay on a certain date, in which case they're not going to be active in payroll. They won't be pulled into a payroll batch because they're not active in payroll. Same type of thing happens with time off accruals. Maybe because she's using her sick leave to cover, if that's what I'm doing, she continues accruing time off. So this could be blank, and it's going to just continue doing whatever the accruals are set up for the time off plans that they have assigned to them. But again, maybe they don't have enough time to cover the entire time they're going to be gone, and you want to stop the accruals on a particular day so they're not accruing while they're not active employees and they're on leave. You can use this. These two dates do not need to be filled in with the same values. You could have one filled in, one blank, or both filled in or both blank. All right, and then you'll see additional notes down here. So this would allow you to, put in more than I put in up here. And of course, you could have, this is a text, or not a text field, but a formatted field here. So if you need to copy and paste from emails or something like that, and add a bunch of notes in here, you can do whatever you want. Use these controls up here to change the font and all those types of things. So that's what that allows you to do right there. And then of course I would save this record. All right, so she's technically on leave because if you look at the date, 7/28, and then 8/8 is her return date. So when I come here and I do leave of absence, she should be the one who shows up. Remember, previously there was nobody there. And again, if I had used maybe Monday's date, and I said I think it's August 4th, she would not show up here yet because she's not on leave. But then on Monday, if I logged in, I would see her on leave. All right. And then same type of thing happens with the end date. Let's say that we knew the end date was going to be on the 8th, and you put that in there as the end date of leave. It would show that in there and effective on 8/9, and going forward, she would show as active. All right. So that's how that works here with the leave. Now, these columns here, we added a couple columns here in our latest release based off of our CFRs, or customer feature requests. So please keep those coming in. I believe it was the leave reason notes that we added in here that wasn't here previously. And just so you know, you can click on these columns and you can hide this. Now, this applies in many different places where we have columns. For an example, on that employee list I was just looking at, you can add and remove columns if you need to. And you'll see you can group by various things. Now, maybe that doesn't make a lot of sense here because there's just one record, but if she had several records, I might want to group them up by, this type here. So I could group here, and you'll notice here, it would show that now. She has one record, but I could collapse down the group and so forth. And then of course, if I don't need that anymore, I can tell it to, not group by the field by unchecking where it says show in groups. All right, and of course, just like with any other column, I can click and sort here. Again, I wish you had multiple records so I could do that. Now, this will show all records of leave, so they don't go away once the leave has ended. It is still visible in here, so you can report on it, and of course, just look at that information. All right, I did see there was a question up there. Yeah, so automatically generating a timesheet. Now, that depends on what's happening with the timesheet. I do know that some people have automatic timesheets created where it just creates hours for them. If the person did put in a time off request related to this, maybe in her situation, she did 2 weeks from the 28th to the 8th. On the timesheet, I would see whatever the reason was. Let's say it's PTO or sick leave or something, that would be in there. Now, one of the things that we recently added is the ability for the system to automatically create timesheets for people on a task scheduled basis. So that way, you don't have to remember to go in and create a timesheet for her. It'll create that. And that actually applies to more than just this person, but you can automatically create timesheets for anybody. And let me just show you real quick where that is, because there's a few different ways you can do this. If you're not aware of creating timesheets for people, you can go to Team Timesheets. A graphic finally coming up there. And here I don't have any timesheets. I know this is back in a couple months ago. It doesn't really matter, but you'll see here where I can do a Team Punch. And then I have an option here under Punch, assuming it is enabled, to create empty timesheets. Now, I need to be able to have access to Team Timesheets and things like that. An individual employee can create their own timesheet if it's not already been created. But if I need to do this, I can create empty timesheets, select one or more employees, like I have them all selected here, and then hit Punch. I'm not going to do it for everybody because it does take a little bit of time when I've got a lot. Let me just do it for the first 3. and does very quickly when I only do 3 here. Now you'll see how these people have some time here. Now let me go to, I did a month. And I don't know what my schedule is. If I even have one back there, I think it was back in February. I don't remember the exact dates. I think I did February 2nd to the 5th or the 8th here. Let's see here. And okay, well, either way, you see I have time now. You may wonder, how am I getting these 41 hours? Now, of course, I could have had that person clocking in and out. However, there is a way to create hours out here if you don't have that. Now, that could be in a few things. One is, as I mentioned, the time off requests. Those would populate the hours. In the timesheet layout, you also can tell the system to auto-populate hours. Right here, auto-populate hours. Now, that's not just going to automatically give people 40 hours unless you set up a work period for them. So there's different ways of doing this. I don't want to go into all the detail of this, but that's how I could do that. And as I mentioned, if they did do a time off request, it would create the timesheet for them for, let's say 40 hours, if that's what it was. And I don't need to worry about that. I did want to mention, just because it is a new feature, and I talked about it a couple weeks ago when we did the update webinar, and that is a new thing under Task Scheduler, which I don't have set up here, so I will set it up to automatically create timesheets. So I don't have to go to that team timesheet, team punch, all those steps I just did. I can say, yes, on a weekly basis, let's say every Sunday, if that's the beginning of your pay period, and I'll just say at 1 a.m. And I'm going to call this create timesheets. Okay, make it active. And we now have a new system task in here called timesheet create. When I do this, I select which timesheet layout I want to create. And I believe that was called weekly. And what this will do is it's going to run that process I just did manually of team punch and create empty timesheets, but it will do this automatically. And it's going to do that at 1 a.m. on Sundays. So it'll create that for me, so I don't have to remember to do that. Now, it's very useful if you do have the auto-populate. It's not as useful if you don't have the auto-populate, because as soon as somebody clocks in, it's going to start creating a timesheet for them. But just to show you those options, if I had done that and I let this run on Sunday morning at 1 a.m., I would come in here and I'd see timesheets for everybody here. All right, so back to leave of absence. I know that kind of a little tangent there, but I saw the question about adding the time to the timesheet. And of course, the approvals, get that stuff to the payroll, get the person paid if that, that option there to not stop the pay is turned on. So if this is blank and they had 40 hours, as an example, in my weekly example, they would get paid for this week and next week. All right. Reports. Now, of course, you could make a dashboard on here. We've talked about the advanced dashboards before, and you can make a dashboard to show like leave of absence and things like that. I can make a data grid for this too. So if I want to have one out there to pull in certain data, I can do that. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, we do have a leave of absence report now. I couldn't remember where that was. Under employment is leave of absence. And you'll see here, the options for this. So of course, if you have multiple employers like I do, you could choose the period of time. All right. So current month obviously would be like July, quarter would be, third quarter, et cetera. I can do it in a date range. So if I know like who's on leave of absence in this time frame, and then of course I can break it down by various groups if I need to, so here by employer. But if I wanted to look at a certain department or something, I could do that. All right. And of course my sorting, go with employee name. And I'll go ahead and run this. All right. So there's Bethany, my person with the leave of absence. I just have one, so it's very simple. All right. And of course, I could have other options on there, as you saw. If I wanted to add department or cost center, I could do that. All right, there's department. So obviously this one is, formatted in the landscape view, because we have so many columns on here. This might be more appropriate to export out to an Excel versus run as a PDF. And of course, this is something that you could task schedule as well. I think I probably should do a training on the task scheduler. We may not have done one in a long time, so we probably will have one coming up now that I'm thinking about it, of how to set up the task scheduler, because this is another thing. You could schedule a report like this to run and be delivered to yourself or whoever you need to on an automatic basis, maybe monthly or weekly. You want to know who's on leave. And so that could be an example of that. So this is any report you can schedule to be out there. All right, so now let's say she comes back early or she comes back and I want to put in those dates. Of course, I can come in here, look at my leave of absence employees, and I can go into her existing record in here and I can make some changes. Maybe she provided some more detail and I want to put something in the notes, either here or here. I want to add some other attachments. I can go in and drag and drop some or add them. But maybe I do find out when she's actually coming back, and she's going to come back a little early, let's just say on the 7th. And I can make that change. So what'll happen is on the 7th, still turn back automatically from on leave to an active employee. Okay, so very easy to update those things if you ever needed to do that and see that information out there for leave of absence. All right, now I do from time to time hear about, can an employee request a leave of absence through self-service? We don't currently have a way for them to do that outside of if you have a leave reason of leave of absence. So it's not a leave of absence, but it'd be like a time off plan that's assigned to the employee for leave of absence. I don't know if I have one configured, but you would need a time off plan for that. A lot of companies in the US, they might set up one for, let's say, FMLA, like I have one here. And that way they could track if somebody's on the family medical leave. Of course, if you're not in the US, you still may track this, using other things. This is a non-accruing plan, so they're not earning X number of hours per pay period, but it allows me to have them do a request for time off, and then I can go and add that leave of absence as necessary. So this is one option to do that. It's not a directly adding leave of absence, but it's a way for the employee to do this through self-service. They could, in essence, come in. I'm not logged in as Bethany, but I could come in and they could add, select the reason here, the start date and time. I can go back and say it's the 28th through the 8th all day. And then she might put in here, illness leave. Oops. And submit that. Now, of course, she would have done this through self-service, but I would still need to go and add that leave of absence record in that situation. And one of the things you can do with this type of plan is you can link a non-accruing plan, let's say like family medical leave, to an accruing plan so that they can say, I want to use my sick leave or I want to use my vacation, or maybe even both. Maybe they use, they've got a whole bunch of time saved up in sick and vacation and they want to use them all. System can link multiple plans together so that it actually would use the sick leave and then also count as FMLA leave. All right, so that's an example here. As you see, did 80 hours because it skipped the weekends. And so there is her request. And then I would add in still the leave of absence. Now, I did mention, the adding the columns here is something we recently did. Let's talk real quick about the CFRs. I know I mentioned this frequently, but probably not enough because we always are soliciting your feedback and your requests for improvements to the system. Of course, the help here is going to show you help on this screen and everything I just talked about. And soon we'll have a video down here that'll be a copy of this. But you'll see here this little new idea. I like to think of this as the magic wand, because our new idea magicians will take these ideas and they will add something into the system. Now, it won't be like immediately, like this thing from Kristen won't be immediately done, but we go through here and we pull these ideas out of here, especially the ones that have a lot of votes, and we add those into the system. In fact, if you go down, you will see some in here that were suggested recently that are now in the system. All right, expense reports being marked as paid is one. And if you go down, you'll see several others that are that way. And again, what we're doing is we are looking at these votes. You'll see here, like the app, we actually are adding that in there. I won't go too much into that, but we are adding that in there, and employee address history. So these types of things, we look at these, we pick up these ideas, and we add them into the system here. So I recommend, of course, not only making your own suggestions, but if you do have, time, which everybody's got a ton of time during the day, I'm sure, to go through our board and say, yes, I like this idea. Can I get that added in there? And we will go through here and we'll add these in. So if you had an idea about a new field on leave of absence or being able to do a request through self-service, you might come in here, hit new post, say request LOA in self-service. All right, and back there, look, column request. That was one that's the one I was just talking about. And then this shows ones that are similar. And you might say, I would like my employees to be able to request an LOA through self-service without a time off plan, something like that. Put it as a feature request. Some of our clients have even like drawn up little ideas for how that might look. They might draw a little form or something like that, and then put that in there. And again, if you do see something like that, you might want to vote that up and say, yes, this would be a great idea. I agree. And you can even reply. Okay, so I know we didn't go into a lot of depth. Some of these go a lot longer than today's, and I appreciate your time today. Let's look at what's coming up in the near future, because the next one is actually going to be pretty exciting. It is a new feature that we added uh, in our latest release. So here you can see our upcoming schedule of events. In a couple of weeks here, we're going to be talking about the 9-box grid, aka succession planning. We've talked about succession planning in the past, but we just keep making it better. So the 9-box grid and the ability to see that individually on employees is a feature we added in the latest release. And I talked about it in the webinar, but we want to go into a little bit more detail on how that all works. So on the 14th, we will be talking about that. And then towards the end of the month of August, you'll see here salary grades. This is a topic we've never covered. And we have salary grades as well as salary steps in the system. Talk about how that is set up and how that works on an employee's record. It will then dovetail right into that compensation management webinar there, because the compensation management can use salary grades as well as things like performance review scores and even location differentials. So those are features not in the latest release, but actually one release ago, we made a lot of enhancements to compensation management. So I want to kind of put it all together with the salary grades and the compensation management. So those are coming up there. And as always, if you do have questions, we encourage you to reach out to us, help@CriterionHCM.com. If you are working through a partner, that's probably going to be your first stop, is to go talk to them. Our partners are experts in the software. And if there's anything that is outside of their pay grade, they can come back to us and we will help them out. Or maybe we'll reach out to you directly if there is something that is super urgent and maybe going through the partner won't be quick enough. But please reach out to your partners first. Otherwise, help@CriterionHCM.com. We'll get back to you as soon as we can. And thank you for joining us today. I will see everyone again in a couple of weeks. Thank you so much.